Welcome to the Mobile Workforce Podcast, where we sit down and have real conversations with business leaders that have been where you are. During these interviews, we'll dive into what it takes to improve systems and champion processes that maximize performance. Each week, our trailblazing guests share their experiences and understanding of the workforce to help inspire change, challenge our thinking, and share what it takes to successfully travel the road to profitability. Now here's our host, co-founder and chief evangelist of About Time and WorkMax, Mike Merrill.
Hello and welcome back to the Mobile Workforce Podcast. I'm your host, Mike Merrill, and today we are excited to have the same guest we did last week, Helen Fanucci, back on as a guest. So today, Helen and I are going to speak more about building and retaining the right team for your business. Helen has written a best-selling book on the topic called Love Your Team, a survival guide for sales managers in a hybrid world. Today, Helen and I are going to talk about your top talent in your organization and why it is so important to retain and maintain that talent for today's success. So thanks for joining us again today, Helen. Looking forward to another great conversation.
Yeah, me too. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, our last conversation was a lot of fun. I always love talking about sales, so this is fun for me.
Great. So
awesome. So let's just start right off and talk about why, in your opinion, is retention of that talent that you've worked so hard to bring on and to train up just so valuable in companies?
Yeah. So at least in my business, in our, in the tech world, if you have a seller, a top talent, let's say their quota is $1 million a year, and it takes you typically 3 months to replace them, and then another 6 months to train them up. That's $750,000 out of the $1 million for the year that's at risk. And a manager literally can't make their quota if they have too much seller churn, particularly sellers that are producing. And that's only if that seller you hired actually works out, because that's not 100% guarantee either. So people who are trained and are performing really well, and however you define top talent, and it might be a sales talent, it could be somebody that is in your operations team and maybe they're not on quota, but yet to replace them, you go, ugh. So find out what matters to your sellers or your talent, because for some of them, it may be work flexibility. Maybe they have small children and they want to be home by 4 p.m, and figure out how you can accommodate your top talent. And for others, maybe it's they want to learn some skills so that they can run their own business or be promoted to supervisor or manager or what have you. And, I think about anybody who works for me as I'm a stop on their career journey. So I don't try to hang on too tight, because at some point we're going to part ways. They're going to move on, or I'll move on, or what have you. And if I'm known as being a great developer and supporter of top talent, then it's easy for me to hire new people because of the reputational advantage that affords me.
Yeah, that's a great point. And if you're a great developer of talent, then I may believe in you and hang on a little extra longer, because I think you're going to help me get to where I want to. I don't have to change companies to do it, right?
Right. Because there's always a risk. I had someone on my team that worked for me like 20 years ago. Her saying was, the grass isn't greener, it's just a different shade of brown.
Oh, I love that. I haven't heard that one before.
Yeah, because there's inevitably in any job or situation, there's things you love and things that you don't love. And, for some people, maximizing income is the thing, and that's great. So how can we, make that part of the equation too? But I find more often than not, it's not straight up money. It's other things that make the work environment enjoyable and satisfying and rewarding.
Yeah, and you think about it, it's just the thought crossed my mind. And I think we all know that this is a real thing, but someone's spouse or partner at home, what do they want? What are they encouraging this employee of yours or ours to be doing? And so maybe asking that question or having an understanding of what the goals are of their household, so to speak, so that you can more align the areas that you work with them on, and be flexible, right?
Yeah, that particularly I know has come into play for folks, not so much these days with a lot of more flexibility of where people work, but it used to be when people were traveling too many weeks or days out of a month that became more of a challenge sometimes on the home front. And also people's life situations are really different. You have, small kids versus teenagers versus, other stages of life or sports. People want to, be home for sports. So how do you make that work? How do you make work for people's lives? And that's no small feat. And so managers and supervisors have a lot that they can do to help make life work for the team that is working for them.
Yeah, and along the lines of what we've been talking about, that most of us have heard of the Great Resignation, so to speak, that has occurred, and I hope we're on our rebound from that and on our way back from it. But how has that shortage of good talent and actual capable workers in the workforce impacted the way that you've approached retention?
Yeah, it's a really great question. So before the pandemic, I would say employers had the power. Top talent can always choose their work, the people who are in high demand. During and after the pandemic, I mean, I know COVID's still around, but the power shift changed to the employee. Talent was scarce, hard to find qualified workers. And so there was a lot more flexibility afforded to workers. And you're no longer competing for people in the same geography if your talent can work from anywhere. Now, I know that's, I think, probably quite different in construction where you compete within a geography because people are hands-on building a home or what have you. And I think what's going on now with, at least in tech, with all the layoffs, is there's some testing of the water of employers to regain some of the power and ground that they feel like they lost. So, for example, I recently read that Amazon is going to require their teams to be in the office 3 days a week. Now, maybe that's because some people have moved away and they want to actually shed more talent, more employees, because they've also said that. And okay, if we require you to go in the office 3 days a week, you'll resign and then we won't have to pay severance. So I think the shift between talent and employer and the power equation is at play, and it's not settled out into a new normal. And I imagine in construction, you're always looking for great workers and great talent, and probably pay is really crucial, but also quality of work and reputation and how you treat them. I know in the past when I've been involved with construction projects, the general contractor was very diligent in making sure that the house was ready for that trade to come in, whether it's electrical or plumbing, and then doing things to create an environment where the next trade could come in. Because sometimes the trades can conflict with each other, and subs wanted to come in, get their job done, and go to another job. So there's things in the construction business, I think, that you can be seen as a great person to work for because your subs come in and come out and are efficient, and the work environment is conducive for them to do their best work.
Yeah, I love that you brought that up, because it isn't just our direct employees, but we have to be aware of how, hopefully we as an organization are, for lack of a better term, a delight to work for and with. And so, what other things, let's say in a subcontractor relationship, what do you think a general contractor could do aside, okay, the job site's actually ready when I say it is, maybe it's clean. Are there any other ideas you have that can help retain subcontractor talent?
Pay on time.
Okay. Yeah, that's the big one, right?
Yeah, pay on time, because I know some folks feel strung out a bit. So pay on time, and make sure you coordinate with a homeowner if it's, that they get their construction loan, or I believe, for construction loans, there are certain milestones that have to be achieved before the homeowner can get paid, so that then they pay the GC and the GC can pay on time. It can be a complex chain, but I know paying on time is probably a pretty big one, because the sub might have workers that get paid every Friday. That's not uncommon.
Right. Yeah, great points. So that, I think it's back to what we said in the previous podcast that we recorded. We're all just people, and nobody really sets out to do a bad job. Nobody wants to, I don't think that they set out to be lazy, so to speak, even the ones that struggle with maybe that work ethic. But we need to control the variables the best we can, so that environment for someone to slack off or to not be as engaged isn't as easy to get to, right? By the way that we control the environment that we have them working in.
Yeah, I think also having a schedule, where a predictable schedule, and I know some general contractors do that better than others. So if they can schedule out 2 weeks, then I'll know what I need an electrician 2 weeks, and the electrician, that's predictable. That reputation also matters for subs, that they have a predictable schedule and that the materials are there. So if you're waiting for, a delivery of tiles for the roof tiles, or lumber for, framing, or kitchen cabinets to be delivered, that they're actually there and predictable as much as possible.
Yeah, I love that. All great advice. So when we scale it back to the actual workers, individuals, employees, what are some key signs, other than, they showed up again today? I wasn't sure they were going to. What are some things that they can tell a business owner, hey, these employees feel appreciated, welcome, a part of the team, that the companies can be more aware of?
Yeah. So in my world, how engaged are they? Do they, when I schedule a one-on-one meeting, do they show up? Do they have their video on if we're, remote? Do they ask questions? Are they aware of what's going on? So are they kind of engaged in the business? And I would think that on a construction site, do you have workers that are on their phone a lot? Are they texting? What's your protocol? Because I wouldn't think a GC would want to have workers that are on their phone and texting, or getting phone calls during a project. Maybe that, I don't know what the standard is, but I would be thinking that person's not really focused on what they're doing. They're distracted, and maybe they need to go do something else because this isn't the job for them. So that, I don't know if that ever happens. I imagine it could or would. And I think there's also a compassion factor, though. Things come up. People get sick. There are deaths in the family. There's births. There's all sorts of life happens. So, I find it goes a long way to understand people's situation as much as they're willing to share, so that you can accommodate that where you can.
Yeah, I love that. And along those same lines, so it sounds to me like you're talking about the individual and getting to know what makes them tick. I mean, you hear the phrase different strokes for different folks. So what are some ways that companies can determine what those best motivators might be for a given team or part of their organization that they might be struggling with? I'll ask.
Sure. Yeah, have a conversation.
Wait, that's way too advanced. What are you talking about? What is this madness?
Ask, find out what matters and have some kind of checkpoint. Maybe you talk to that person once a month. I don't know what the right frequency. For me, it was every 2 weeks. I'd have a one-on-one. My book is actually all about conversations because that's foundational. So I have broken it to the 17 conversations sales managers need to have with their team. And again, it's tech and it's large enterprise companies, so it may or may not apply. But foundational to building a relationship and trust is having a conversation, find out what matters to your employees on their terms, and figure out how you can help them achieve it, whether it is learning new skills or flexibility because they need to drop their kids off at 8 a.m. or I don't know what the circumstance would be.
Yeah, that's great. So I'm glad you brought up your book because I did want to talk a little bit more about that. Are there some things in your book that you are surprised that people have resonated with people maybe differently than you expected?
Yeah, one of the things is I envision the book to be applicable for sales managers. I've gotten feedback from sellers and even people who are early in career, like millennials or Gen Zs who are like trying to figure out what they want to do, that they're questioning, what does good management look like? And so they're kind of looking at this and going, oh, okay, well, here's what I want to have from my manager. And can I ask for that we have a regular one-on-one or that we have clarity, clarify expectations, or maybe they're using it as a framework as they think about, okay, I want to be a manager someday. What are the things that I need to learn and skills that I need to acquire in order to be, ready to be a manager?
That's beautiful. When you look back at that, I talked to a lot of authors. I've always said, I'm going to write a book someday, and still want to do that at some point. But as I have talked with different authors, a lot of them say, when I ask them, hey, you really happy with how your book landed and how it ended up? And usually they are. Obviously they got into the final revision where they were good with it and ready to publish. So, but looking back, are there some other areas that you want to explore deeper? I mean, maybe another book that might come out in one of those gaps, or any other areas that with the more recent changes in the economy and in the market out there that you would add additionally to?
Not at this moment, because I know how slow people change and how difficult it is for organizations to evolve and change. So I think that some of the fundamentals in the book are going to be useful, hopefully for a long time to come. And, there's a lot that can be done with the book as is. I don't know, maybe, one idea is maybe a book more about the mechanics of pipeline and growing a business. But there's so many books out there about sales techniques and things like that, a lot of people who speak about that. So I think I'm good for now on the book front. And I've been really gratified that organizations, CEOs are adopting it and making it required reading for all their leaders. There's organizations that are giving it away when they do, and I have gone to some book signings where, people are invited to an event and then the book is given away. And so that's been really gratifying.
Wow. Yeah, I can only imagine. I'm sure you've changed a lot of lives. I need to pick up a copy myself, actually. So fascinated with the conversation we've had. I also wanted to bring up, in our last episode where we talked, I mentioned at the front that you also started hosting a podcast last year, and I know that's something you've dabbled in a little bit as well. What have you learned from that experience, and what have been some of the positive takeaways from doing that so far?
Yeah, well, one of the great things is learning how other people think about leading teams and how they also deal with their own um, fears or confidence or lack of confidence. So some of that has come out, um, on the podcast. Like Tracy, one of the gals that was a guest, she's a general manager of sales at Microsoft. And she talked about embracing fear and getting on the other side of fear, and that was actually a gift. And I don't think of fear personally as a gift, but she just kind of flipped it on its side and she says, it's always in the sidecar. And you think about a motorcycle, it's always in the sidecar. It comes with me, but it doesn't rule me.
Oh, I love
And I thought that was really, really great.
Yeah, it's a great point. There's no tire to steer on the sidecar, but it's always there. That's interesting.
Yeah. So, and also I wanted to get more comfortable with the podcast medium. And so that was one of the reasons why I also started a podcast, so I could get more comfortable and learn more, because it is such a ubiquitous medium now for communication. That also, that was more my own internal process to feel comfortable, if you will.
Yeah, I can relate to that. And it is interesting. We were talking earlier about, it's like when you're interviewing or leading a conversation, figuring out how to ask a better question that's shorter and more succinct. I mean, I struggle with that all the time. I don't know if that's been a challenge for you or not.
Well, I usually try to get the questions figured out ahead of time, and then I'll share that with a guest and edit it, and we can take the conversation in different directions. So that was my approach. I don't know if it's a good approach, but that's what I've done. Maybe overly orchestrating.
No, we agree with that. We like to do that as well, have somewhat of an outline. But the ad lib stuff's always fun. And of course, when something hits you interestingly or funny, it's nice to explore that as well.
Yeah, you bet.
So you've been an author, you're doing consulting, you host a podcast. What's next in this journey for you?
Well, I'm actually working on kind of a product where I can scale some of the things that I do and create kind of a pipeline as a service product. And so I'm in the process of thinking that through and figuring out how I do that.
That's exciting. We'll have to have you on again down the road when you've got something out that you want to announce and share with the world. We'd love to be a part of that, because I know and it's just how my brain works. As we're talking, I'm picturing customers and people, organizations that we work with that I know, and I'm curious as to how they're going to receive the information we're sharing. And so I hope it resonates with them, but I have a suspicion that this episode and our prior one will be very useful for them and give them some things to think about internally.
Great. Fantastic. And, people can find me on LinkedIn, and happy to take questions. So that's if I can be of help, that's great to know.
That's fantastic. And we'll make sure that we link all this in the show notes and get all of your book, also the podcast episodes you've released, and your LinkedIn profile. Are there any other things that you would like to make sure that we leave with the listeners before we wrap up today?
I always am interested in feedback and how both the podcast lands, but also feedback on the book. So, reach out to me. I'd like to know.
Perfect. Well, I will personally take those challenges and get you some feedback myself. So watch for that order on Amazon. I assume that's where I get the book. Is that right?
Yes, Amazon. It's also an audiobook now as well. So I know that's a way that many people prefer to, read books is by listening to an audiobook. So it's in Kindle. paperback, hardcover, now on audiobook as well.
Perfect. So is Audible, is that one of the platforms?
Yeah.
Perfect. I love that. I have a subscription to that one, so maybe I'll get it that way. And I actually like to listen to the book and also follow along and mark it up as I go. So twice as effective. But
great.
Awesome. Well, this has been so much fun. I've appreciated having you on, and we just look forward to catching up with you again down the road. And I can't wait to read that book.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
All right. Take care, Helen. We'll see you.
Thank you for joining us today on the Mobile Workforce Podcast, sponsored by About Time Technologies and WorkMax. If you liked the conversation we had today, or were able to learn anything new or helpful, please make sure to follow us on our WorkMax page on LinkedIn and on Instagram at WorkMax_. And subscribe to the show on iTunes or your preferred podcast platform so you will never miss another insightful episode. Also, if you enjoyed the podcast, please leave us a 5-star rating and review and share the show with your friends and colleagues. Your support means the world to us and will allow us to continue providing impactful information with others looking to improve their results in their business and, in turn, their life.